The Bear Hunt Part 2. The fire crackled low in the hearth of the McKenna cabin, casting long shadows on the log walls. The wounds Liam had sustained were worse than Jeremiah first thought. His brother lay on the cot, pale and feverish, his arm bound in blood-soaked bandages. Sarah had been at his side for hours, her young hands tending to his every need, her face a mask of determination. Jeremiah stood by the window, staring out at the dark woods, the distant trees swaying gently in the breeze. It had been 2 days since the attack, and yet the forest still seemed alive with unseen eyes watching them, waiting. The bear was still out there, that much was certain. What troubled Jeremiah most, though, was that it hadn't returned. It was stalking them, playing a game they weren't prepared for. He could feel it in his bones. "We can't stay here much longer," Jeremiah muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. "I know," came a voice from behind him. Sarah stood with her arms crossed, eyes narrowed like her mother used to do when she was troubled. He turned to her, a flicker of surprise crossing his weathered face. "You should be resting." "So should you," she shot back, her voice sharp but steady. "Papa, what's the plan? That thing isn't going away." Jeremiah admired her fire, but there was something far more important at stake now. "The plan is for you and your brother to get out of here. Go to town. Stay with Mrs. Boyle. I'll handle the rest." Sarah shook her head. "No, you're not sending us away. You said it yourself. The bear's after our land, our family. I'm not running from it." Jeremiah opened his mouth to argue, but something in his daughter's eyes stopped him. That same fierce determination he'd had at her age burned there. She was a McKenna through and through. Running wasn't in her nature. "Fine," he finally relented, "but if it comes back tonight, you hide. Promise me." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she nodded. As night fell, the oppressive silence returned to the forest, deeper and more unsettling than before. Jeremiah and Sarah kept watch from the porch, their rifles loaded and ready. The moon was a thin crescent in the sky, offering little light, and the shadows stretched long and menacing over the clearing. Hours passed, and still, nothing moved. But the sense of being watched only grew stronger, gnawing at Jeremiah's nerves. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves made him grip his rifle tighter. And then, there it was, the sound he'd been dreading, a low, guttural growl, so deep it seemed to come from the very earth itself. It rolled out of the forest, sending a shiver down Jeremiah's spine. He rose from his chair, signaling Sarah to be still. The trees at the edge of the clearing shifted, their branches trembling. Something massive moved among them, but it stayed just out of sight, as if it was taunting them, daring them to make the first move. Jeremiah took a deep breath, steadying himself. His hands were firm on the rifle, but inside he was shaking. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. Not now. The beast stepped into the clearing, and for the first time Jeremiah saw it clearly in the moonlight. It wasn't just a bear, it was something more, a grotesque combination of raw animal power and something almost human. Its fur was streaked with scars, its eyes gleaming with unnatural intelligence. And worse, it was bigger than before, much bigger. Sarah gasped softly behind him, but Jeremiah didn't take his eyes off the creature. The bear stood still for a moment, its massive head tilted slightly as if considering them. Then, with deliberate slowness, it began to move forward. "Stay back," Jeremiah hissed at Sarah, "and get inside." But Sarah didn't move. "Papa, it's not stopping." Jeremiah took aim, his finger hovering over the trigger. The beast was only 20 paces away now, its dark eyes locked on his. This was it. It had come for them. He squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, shattering the stillness of the night. The bullet struck the bear in the chest, but this time it didn't flinch. Instead, it let out a roar that echoed through the trees, a sound so filled with rage that it rattled Jeremiah to his core. The beast charged. "Get inside, now!" Jeremiah bellowed, his heart pounding in his chest as he fired again, hitting the creature in the shoulder. It barely slowed. Sarah darted inside the cabin, slamming the door behind her, but Jeremiah didn't have time to follow. The bear was nearly upon him. Desperation gripped him as he scrambled to reload, but it was too late. The bear lunged, its massive paws swiping through the air with terrifying speed. Jeremiah barely dodged in time, the force of the blow sending him sprawling across the porch. Pain shot through his side as he crashed to the ground, his rifle skittering out of reach. For a moment everything went still. The bear loomed over him, its breath hot and rancid, its eyes burning with hatred. This was the end. But then, a sharp crack echoed through the night, and the beast jerked back in surprise. Blood sprayed from its side as another shot rang out. Jeremiah looked up, and there, standing in the doorway of the cabin, was Sarah, her small hands gripping the rifle like she'd been born with it. Her face was pale but determined, her eyes locked on the creature. "Over here!" she shouted, her voice shaking but strong. The bear hesitated, its attention shifting to the new threat. It growled, low and menacing, before turning its massive head toward her. "No!" Jeremiah scrambled to his feet, ignoring the pain in his ribs. He couldn't let it get to her, but Sarah didn't flinch. She stood her ground, raising the rifle again. The bear roared and charged, its massive body barreling toward her. Just as it reached the porch, a third shot rang out, this time from behind the creature. The bear staggered, its charge faltering as blood poured from a fresh wound in its side. Jeremiah turned to see Liam standing in the clearing, his face pale and sweat-drenched, but his rifle steady in his hands. The bear, wounded and bleeding, let out one last furious roar before collapsing onto the ground with a heavy thud. For a moment no one moved. The only sound was the ragged breathing of the McKennas and the soft crackling of the cabin fire behind them. The beast was dead, its massive body sprawled across the porch. Jeremiah rushed to Sarah's side, pulling her into his arms. "You did it," he whispered, his voice hoarse. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of relief and fear. "We did it." Liam limped toward them, his face drawn but triumphant. "It's over." But as Jeremiah looked down at the bear's twisted, unnatural form, a cold chill ran through him. Something wasn't right. The beast may have been dead, but deep in his gut, he knew this was far from over. The land had been disturbed, something old and dark awakened, and the McKennas were now bound to it in ways they couldn't yet understand. And whatever had driven the bear to their door wasn't finished with them yet. The forest still whispered with danger. The beast was only the beginning. The McKennas had won this round, but the true threat lingered in the shadows, waiting for its time to strike. And when it did, they would have to face something far more terrifying than a mere bear. Thank you for watching. Be sure to hit subscribe for more Camp Bound stories.